Lord's work. Vengeance is his, but I'ma do it first. Go see Django Unchained. It was a good movie. Django Unchained. Jamie Foxx, Leonardo DiCaprio, Quentin Tarantino movie. Simon Gertie is one of my heroes. It's one of my favorite books. I'm almost all the way through it. Simon Gertie was a white man who deflected to the Indian side, fought on the Indian side. He was captured by the Seneca Indians when he was real young. The Seneca Indians. And so he learned a lot of Seneca traditions and Seneca ways and languages. He was a main interpreter for a lot of the negotiations. He also, his father was killed by a British official. His stepfather was burned at the stake in front of his eyes by the Seneca and several other tribes. So Simon Gertie had a decision, you know. He couldn't have liked the British, and he couldn't really, I guess he could. He did become, after they burned his stepfather, John Turner, at the stake, they made him run the gauntlet. And after he rode the gauntlet, they said that he was one of them because he ran so valiantly. So he ran the gauntlet. So did Simon Kinton. So did Daniel Boone. The gauntlet. The gauntlet is where they all lined up with sticks and clubs, and they would just hit a person as they were going by, and usually it was just used for torture. They would just beat the shit out of people and just torture them until they killed them. It wasn't designed for heroes, but sometimes somebody would actually get through the gauntlet. And Simon Gertie didn't get through the gauntlet, but he fought really hard. He passed out, and then they said that he was going to be family from then on. Simon Gertie. Simon Gertie. Now, Simon Gertie, after he lived with the Senecas, then he acted as a traitor. Kind of a traitor to the Indians, but also a traitor of goods. He was in Dunmar's War. He acted as a scout in Dunmar's War. The Shawnee were enemies of the Seneca. So he remembered what the Shawnees were like. But then eventually he became an Indian defender and fought several battles just strictly for the Indians. September 1778, Northern Kentucky. There was a battle. It says instructions from the British government to the governor Hamilton of Detroit. There can be little doubt that the Indians will readily and eagerly engage in crushing the rebellion and restoring the Constitution. It is the king's command that you should assemble as many Indians as you conveniently can, place proper persons at the head to conduct their parties to restrain them from committing violence on the well-affected and inoffensive inhabitants, and to supply them in making a diversion and exciting an alarm upon the frontier. So, I marked 3 pages. Here's Lord Dunmar. Lord Dunmar wasn't worried about Dunmar's War. Dunmar was worried about being fat and getting drunk. Dunmar, Lord John Murray, Earl of Dunmar IV, he was getting drunk, and he was having Simon Gertie do a war dance, and Simon Gertie was doing a war dance. This is right after Logan's family was killed. Logan's family was killed, and who's there to cry for Logan? Captain John Logan writes a letter to Colonel Cressup. What did you kill my people on Yellow Creek for? Captain John Logan writes, July 21st, 1774. What did you kill my people on Yellow Creek for? The white people killed my kin on the Conestoga a great while ago, and I thought nothing of that, but you killed my kin on Yellow Creek, and you took my cousin prisoner. Then I thought I must kill too, and I have been 3 times at war since. The Indians are not angry, only myself. Eventually, Logan was killed. Kind of had a sad life. He started the Dunmar's War. Dunmar sends a militia to Point Pleasant, Virginia. And that's where there was a battle that had happened at Point Pleasant. 1,000 warriors streamed out of the woods against starving Lewis's starving Virginians. The battle raged deep into the evening. 75 of the white soldiers died. 100 more lay wounded. This is Dunlap's War, or Dunmar's War. Lord Dunmar. Also John Murray. John Murray was Lord Dunmar. John Murray was the 4th Earl of Dunmar, the governor of Virginia. Dunmar's War was in 1774, conflict between the colony of Virginia and the Shawnee and Mingo American Indian nations. Lord Dunmore asked the Virginia House of Burgesses to declare a state of war with the hostile Indian nations and order up an elite volunteer militia force for the campaign. The conflict resulted from escalating violence between British colonists who, in accordance with previous treaties, were exploiting and moving into the land south of the Ohio River, modern-day Kentucky and West Virginia, and American Indians who held treaty rights to hunt there of the upper Ohio Valley, assessing the Allegheny. George Washington writes in his journal for Saturday, November 17th, 1770, the Indians, who are very dexterous, even their women in the management of canoes, have their hunting camps and cabins all along the river for the convenience of transporting their skins by water to market. As a result of successive attacks by Indian hunting and war bands upon the settlers, war was declared to pacify the hostile Indian war bands. The war ended soon after Virginia's victory in the Battle of Point Pleasant on October 10th, 1774. So Lord Dunmar's War was in 1774, but the war ended after Virginia's success in the Battle of Point Pleasant. Point Pleasant was in Virginia. As a result of this victory, the Indians lost the right to hunt in the area and agreed to recognize the Ohio River as a boundary between Indian lands and British colonies. All over the Indian national chieftains had signed the treaty. Conflict within the Indian nations soon broke out. Some tribesmen felt the treaty sold out their claims and opposed it, and others believed that another war would mean only further losses of territory to the more powerful British colonies. When war broke out between the colonists and the British government, the war parties of the Indian nations quickly gained power that mobilized various Indian nations to attack colonists during the Revolutionary War. The Yellow Creek Massacre was about where they killed Logan's family. So the Battle of Point Pleasant, known as the Battle of Kanawha, the Battle of Kanawha. The Battle of Point Pleasant is the only major action of Dunmar's War. It was fought on October 10th, 1774, between Virginia militia and American Indians from the Shawnee and Mingo tribes along the Ohio River. Love me. Along the Ohio River near modern Point Pleasant, West Virginia, American Indians under the Shawnee chief Cornstalk. West Virginia, Cornstalk. Y'all killed Cornstalk in the same spot here later on, 3 years later in 1777. Shawnee Chief Cornstalk attacked the Virginia militia who is invading into West Virginia territories. There are Virginians waiting for Dunmar's people to get there. Dunmar's people wasn't there. Under Colonel Andrew Lewis. And the Shawnee Chief Cornstalk attacked him, hoping to halt Lewis's advance into the Ohio country. After a long and furious battle, the Shawnee Chief Cornstalk retreated. After the battle, the Virginians, along with the second force led by Lord Dunmar, the royal governor of Virginia, marched into the Ohio country and compelled Cornstalk to agree to a treaty, ending the war. So Cornstalk signs a treaty. He signs a treaty with the Virginians. He makes peace in the Treaty of Camp Charlotte, ceding to Virginia Shawnee claims to all land south of the Ohio River, Kentucky and West Virginia today. The Shawnee were also obligated in the Treaty of Camp Charlotte to return all white captives and to stop attacking barges of immigrants traveling on the Ohio River. So that's the Battle of Point Pleasant in West Virginia. And Dunmar's War, basically the only action that happened. John Murray was a British peer and colonial governor. He's the son of William Murray, the 3rd Earl of Dunmar, and his wife Catherine. He's best remembered as the last royal governor of the colony of Virginia. So, Cornstalk. Cornstalk was a Shawnee chief. Hokalesqua. That's his name, Hokalesqua. His Shawnee name was Hokalesqua. And if you think about like the Muslims, Muhammad, you're not even allowed to say Muhammad because it's an English variation. The Muhammad you're only allowed in Arabic or in Islam only write his name out or say his name as it was said back then. You cannot change his name in any way. So for us to call him Cornstalk when his name was Hokalesqua, Cornstalk's easier to remember because it's English, but his name is Hokalesqua. So Hokalesqua was a prominent leader of the Shawnee Nation just prior to the American Revolution. Hokalesqua translates loosely into a stalk of corn. Then it's spelled Kolesqua in some accounts with a Q-U-A at the end. Cornstalk opposed European settlement west of the Ohio River in his youth, but he later became an advocate for peace after the Battle of Point Pleasant. He was murdered by American militiamen at Fort Randolph, Point Pleasant during a diplomatic visit in November 1777, which outraged both American Indians and Virginians. Even though Patrick Henry wanted the people who killed Cornstalk to pay for their crimes, nobody ever paid for his crimes. With the insistence of Patrick Henry, the governor of Virginia, Cornstalk's killers, whom Henry called vile assassins, were eventually brought to trial, but since their fellow soldiers would not testify against them, all were acquitted. Cornstalk was originally buried at Fort Randolph. In 1840, his grave was found and remains removed to Mason County Courthouse grounds. In 1954, the courthouse was torn down and he was reburied in Point Pleasant. Legends arose about his dying curse because being the cause of misfortunes in the area, later supplanted by local Mothman stories, though no contemporary historical source mentions any such utterance by Cornstalk. Cornstalk's ghost should put a hex on Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Fort Randolph. Fort Randolph is where he died, November 10th, 1777. And he signed the Treaty of Camp Charlotte. I wasn't right, white people. Shouldn't have killed Cornstalk. So that's Lord Dunmar's War. Point Pleasant, right next to Kentucky. The Shawnee. We're out of Kentucky, West Virginia, the Ohio country, they're everywhere.